the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station. The Global.
Pleasant good evening to you at home or in your vehicle if you are on the road or at work or listening on the radio or on the internet. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. It is Tuesday, the 4th day of August 2026, the 31st Tuesday of 2026, and it's just about 8:02 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies and on QTV. Please follow us on Facebook and on YouTube at Q95 FM Radio. Share the live, like our pages, or on your phone numbers or on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. This is, in fact, our 22nd Global View on Q show for 2026, and we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. With me is my co-host, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, ENT Specialist Dr. I.P. Pascal, and social scientist Simeon Joseph. Good evening to all of you gentle people. Tonight we discuss the topic, the plague. Yes, the plague that is destroying Dominica's free and fair democratic elections. Here are a few talking points or questions, if you like, that I will put to my panelists tonight. What is the cause of the ongoing flawed electoral registration and reconfirmation process in light of the upcoming Roseau North by-election and imminent general election? Why are there so many problems with registration and reconfirmation in the upcoming Roseau North by-election? Why are certain persons who have been registered not been confirmed to date? Why is it that the supplementary electoral list does not state the address of registered voters? Why are DLP supporters only involved in registering and reconfirming voters? Why have voter ID cards not yet been issued to reconfirmed and registered electors in keeping with the law? Why are projects being started in Roseau North only now, after 26 years, in the face of an upcoming by-election? Why does a candidate need police protection to campaign? And can a dysfunctional electoral commission effectively oversee the upcoming by-election and future general elections? There have been public calls for the current commissioners on the Electoral Commission to resign. Would a commission with new commissioners be functional without the structural reforms as suggested by Sir Dennis Byron? The current reconfirmation exercise underway is fraught with irregularities and malpractices that call into question its legitimacy. Will this actually bring forth a new voters register that meets international best practices? Without campaign finance reform, there will be a major imbalance for opposition parties and independent candidates in competing with the ruling party that has governed for 26 years. So are future elections destined to continue the same tints, the tints which the CCG had already cited? Should opposition forces advocate for international intervention before the general election? And besides calling for election observer missions for the general election, what actions can opposition parties and independent candidates pursue towards a free and fair electoral process in Dominica? What are the areas in the new electoral laws passed in Parliament in May of 2025 that are considered not to be conducive to a free and fair electoral context for Dominica? And with the residency requirement in the past electoral laws now abolished, should we expect large numbers of diaspora-based Dominicans to continue accepting inducements such as free transportation and stipends from the ruling party to show up to vote. We look forward to the contributions of Justice Dr. Irving Andre, UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, ENT Specialist Dr. I.P. Pascal, and social scientist Simeon Joseph to this topic, the plague that is destroying Dominica's free and fair democratic elections. So as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give our usual huge shout out and big thank you to our farmers, our healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, public and private sector patriots, and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. We welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica, in the region and globally. Again, we say thank you to Sherwin for keeping us on the air, and thank you, Lambi, on the console, directing the traffic tonight. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us on Facebook and on YouTube. So I go now to Justice Dr. Irving Andre for his first comments on the topic, the plague that is destroying Dominica's free and fair democratic elections. Over to you, Dr. Andre. Your mic is muted.
Yeah, good evening
Good
to the
evening.
esteemed panel, the moderator, Lambi, the technician, Sherwin, your listeners, both at home and abroad, both virtually and otherwise. It is a happy day when we can meet and speak frankly about issues that plague us. Now, the word plague is very apt because it suggests an intervention of momentous proportions. And what we experience is indeed is a plague of momentous proportions. You have raised a number of questions in your opening address regarding the problems with registration and confirmation, the DLP being involved in the process of registering voters, the absence of address on the supplementary electors lists, ID cards missing, the protection to campaign, police escort, reconfirmation flawed, observer missions, quite frankly and honestly, and would be a waste of time. Why? Because those aspects of the plague would have been done before the arrival of these observers. They would have nothing to say. All they can say it was free but not fair. But what has gone on in Dominica needs a much more strong condemnation than these types of pacifist words that constitutes a wink to dishonesty in the electoral process. We have placed, or Dominica has been under intense judicial scrutiny for how it conducts business. A couple of these decisions have gone in favor of seeking to uphold free and fair elections. But why should this be a surprise? Why should we still be talking about free and fair elections? The problems that you unearthed, the problems that you highlighted, Mr. G, are merely, as I've said before, the latest manifestation or iteration about what has plagued Dominica's elections since 2005. There is one underlying justification: to remain in power, to gerrymander the electoral laws which would guarantee a victory for the incumbent. That is all there is to it. And the question is, who among us are playing a supportive role, are providing the scaffolding for this deliberate, cynical, and capricious manipulation of Dominica's electoral laws? Where are the institutions of governance that would guard against that type of cynicism? Where is the Electoral Commission? Where is the integrity in public office? Where is the FIR, the financial, whatever they call themselves, because they didn't do anything? Where are the churches? Where are the unions? Where is the civil society in ensuring that we turn a new leaf, we join the community of nations? And what is most distressing, Mr. G, we have ample evidence of the destruction that that kind of cynicism can cause. This is why, as we speak today, we have become a pariah state. This is why today the US has imposed what it is again, a permanent bond. Whether it's 10,000 US, 15,000 US, 20,000 US, even if it was 1,000 US, it would have a cramping effect on Dominicans who have children perhaps going to school, who may be seeking medical attention, who may have family in the United States. The door has been shut in their faces. What about Europe? Is the same thing. Europe has warned us for a couple of years that if you don't clean up the mess in your CBI program, and their central concern was that the net proceeds of sale of passports should go into the consolidated fund, then you're going to have problems with us. We know what England has already done. What more evidence do we need? And let me say something, Mr. G. Probably I don't listen enough. Have you ever heard on DBS or QFM or God Save the Queen radio station or the King, whatever? Have you ever heard them talk about these measures being instituted by these foreign governments? No, they don't discuss it because they are propaganda extensions of the government, nothing more, nothing less. And why is it that the US has targeted Dominica, Antigua, and Grenada? Now, people have given their different views. One commentator said, no, it has nothing to do with the passports. It is probably because we have linkages with traditional enemies of the United States, such as Venezuela. But it's obviously much more than this. We've had those linkages for some time now. Why should it, at this particular point in time, has the US taken those drastic steps? They've taken those steps to send a message. It is no longer business as usual. And what has been our government's response and those affected? Oh, we're going to try to negotiate. Séance soupe. We will try to negotiate with Trump to change his mind. In what planet do they live and do they survive? The question is, what should the Dominican people do to reverse this calamity which has beset Dominica on account of the leadership that we have? No, you can't say that this happened by nobody saw it coming. You can't say that this backlash has caught Dominica by surprise. The warning bells were being sounded for years. Various entities have sounded those warnings, have talked about the dangers that are stalking Dominica, have warned about the backlash that we will face. And how should I put it as nicely as I can? Supporters of the political directorate, they have backed the leaders. They have attacked people on the opposition, both on Facebook and mirrors or whatever it is. They have called them traitors. They have been willfully and recklessly blind to the calamity that will befall Dominica. And that's exactly where we are now. Dominica has been the subject of a catastrophic failure of its institutions of good governance. But many citizenry have succumbed, have fallen their morals, and have shamefully changed their views. And they have gone to the other side for a few dollars more. And what is the cost to Dominica? The country's been ravaged. The institutions, the nature, the environment is being sold. I heard someone boasting today, well, the lease given to that company involved in the tram or whatever you call it, oh, it's not a 999-year lease. No, not all that. It's just 99 years of fragile land given away, just as the land at the Cabrits was given away. First to Morocco, hotel was built. Somebody from Portsmouth told me that, Andre, there's a Tululu Crab convention at the Morocco Hotel, and there's a sign in front, is only if you can swim, you can come. The whole thing has been reduced to a mockery. That is where we are. What about no bids contract? All these projects, whether it's the marina, whether it's the tram, or whether it's the airport, they have blatantly breached the planning laws of Dominica. Everyone else has to comply, mind you, especially if you are known not to support the other side. But they have shamelessly breached those laws. And we will pay, as we are already paying, a price for the ravaging of the environment. The search for copper. And those fools want you to believe that they're looking for big stones 200 feet into the ground. And just by coincidence, they're looking for those big stones where in the 90s, there were efforts to look for copper in the very same location. Because Dominicans know such. That's the belief. We will buy anything. We will say anything. We will do anything for a few dollars more. And the biggest acolyte who comes on Matt, and Matt welcomes him with open arms because he's from Point Michel, talks that crap because he is working at the location. A shameless conflict of interest. So that is where we are now. And the question is, what do we do as a collective body to change this turn of things? It is clear that there's evidence that certain persons are seeing the dire danger to Dominica, and they're trying to make some efforts to make sure that it's not reversible. But no one can save Dominica except Dominicans themselves. No one can reverse that type of governance. There's talk about reparations, Mr. G. Somebody told me you had a program on reparations last week, and I smiled and I laughed because the chairperson, who I know very well, was saying, but why you like to attack the government, Dr. That nonsense. Why? Because of what they're doing, Dr. Dublin, because of the egregious acts of misgovernance and corruption in Dominica. That's why. And who is paying the price? And as I posed last week, which foreign entity, whether it's England, whether it's France, whether it's Europe, even the States, will give Dominica and some of these other West Indian islands or elsewhere a check for a few $1 million and say, Gaso senyo baga yokaki reparations. Huh? Which leader, upon knowing that in these poor countries, you have some of the leaders saddling and throttling and choking their own people by having to pay $65,000 a month in rent, by driving expensive vehicles, by having a security entourage, by a blatant display of wealth, totally oblivious to the suffering of your people, by wearing fancy hats as they do in England, with the brim big enough to shelter a cow. Which country will give these leaders a check in the name of reparations, knowing fully well where the money will end up? So this is where we are. We have discredited ourselves as a country. Dominicans on the ground haven't done anything wrong, but they have victimized and they have been betrayed in the most shameless ways. So we at a juncture, in my view, where we have to ask ourselves, do we have the fortitude to unite all persons who have an interest in good governance, in saving their country, in bringing some dignity and transparency and accountability to the holy grail of good governance? Do they have the fortitude to come together? Do all the 12 tribes of Israel have the fortitude to come together to rescue their country? Thank you very much.
And thank you, Dr. Andre, for these opening remarks. As usual, very succinct. But let me go to Crispin, former EU Ambassador Crispin Gregoire. Just to bring you back to the topic, Crispin, that we're talking about. You know, so here's the question that I posed earlier. Can a dysfunctional electoral commission effectively oversee the upcoming by-election in Ororo North and then future general elections. You know, there have been public calls for the current commissioners on the Electoral Commission to resign. But would a commission with new commissioners be functional without the structural reforms as suggested by Sir Dennis Byron? So in your remarks, maybe you might want to just tackle this particular question. Crispin, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. G. Good evening. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Well, good evening, first of all, to Dr. Andre, your co-host, and to Simeon Joseph, panelists, and Dr. I.P. Pascal. It's a real pleasure to be on such a panel. And then to Lambi and Sherwin for their stellar work keeping us on air. Mr. G, I think it'll be important for me to state from the outset that the electoral reform that we were fighting for, we fought for it for 15 years, and we eventually we end up in the streets, confronted by the repressive arm of the state several times. And I want to say that it's rather unfortunate where we are today, which is the budget day, that 25 of our electoral reform campaigners are still facing charges before the court under this Slavery Act, or an act from the slavery era. I didn't hear last week's program because I was not able to listen in. But if you're talking about reparations, you certainly cannot not mention that relics of slavery are still alive in our country. It's no accident that the Electoral Commission finds itself in total disarray and totally dysfunctional. Even though I didn't agree with everything, all the recommendations of Sir Dennis Byron, but some things that he recommended made sense, great sense. And it is those things that made great sense in his recommendations that ended up in the dustbin of history, in the dustbin of the ruling party. They didn't see that as important. And one of them being the reform of the Electoral Commission. If you did not reform the Electoral Commission, and if you did not introduce campaign finance reforms, to me, the rest of it is kind of meaningless, really. We still have to fight, because those two things are to me, the most important provisions of the electoral reform battle. So we still have to continue that battle to make sure that those things will be part of our process for free and fair elections in Dominica, because without that, frankly, you know, we at the crossroads. Mr. G, the problem that we have with the Electoral Commission, 2 members of the commission appointed by the ruling party and 2 members of the commission appointed by the opposition forces or parties. In this particular case, it's the opposition people in parliament who nominated them, and those people are independents. And then the person who is supposed to be the most independent of the commission, the chairman, finds himself supporting every directive he gets from the ruling party. One of the biggest problems with this commission, and that has gone back for the last 15 years, is that you have people on the commission who have serious conflict of interest. These are people who are not in a position to take an independent position on that question of election governance in Dominica. And we need that. Even though those people were nominated by their parties, they're supposed to represent the public interest, but not so. These people, because of they're all people who have contracts with the government. We have 3 members of the 5 commissioners who are people selling passports, selling citizenship. So just that reality colors the way they behave on the commission, and consequently, we cannot have an independent commission. Now, I must say that Dominica has the same challenge that Jamaica had, in the sense that a 2-party system, a system which is multi-party but dominated by 2 parties, and a commission of 5 people. And the Jamaicans realized that that was not working for them, and they did do a reform, which I think we could emulate very easily. And what they did was to bring civil society into the commission and let that be part of the law. But that was a no-no for this government. They did not want to deal with the Electoral Commission at all. They want to leave it as is to give them advantage. So here we are in 2026. When we think last year new laws were passed in the parliament, some of these laws are over 100 pages. And the commission continues to just meander, just just pass through. Everything is stamped. If it goes down to a vote, the ruling party wins. And then added to that, we have the election office, right? That is also not independent. The staff of the Electoral Commission, not independent either. And the worst reality is that the commission, even if we were to change members of the commission, we would still end up with the same result, because there is no provision for a different governance framework. So while I don't know what to say about the people who call for these people to resign. Yes, they should probably resign because they're not doing the work of the people. But it won't fundamentally change anything unless, in terms of law, we had an arrangement to put checks and balances on the commission. So that commission is really moribund, and there's nothing we can do with it right now, except to say that the electoral reform process in Dominica is incomplete until such time that the Electoral Commission is reformed and campaign finance brought into the equation. Now, here we find ourselves in 2026. By dint of something we did not see coming, one member of parliament resigns from parliament and forces a by-election. And here is what we have. The context of that by-election is the following: a dysfunctional electoral commission, no voter ID cards, an electoral list that is unclear as to whether what are we using, the old list or new list? What kind of list voters register are we going to use? The Electoral Commission has said nothing on that. And then they disenfranchise, by their own action, they disenfranchise new voters for at least a year or more. And the last thing I would say about the Electoral Commission is their inability to clarify the access to state media, which is part of the reform. Now, I know that the ruling party is not interested in the opposition forces having access to state media. So they left it to the commission to decide that. And the commission will not, there's a majority on the side of the government, and I don't see how that's going to happen unless there's protests. It can't be that people in state media will be the ones to be interviewing the opposition elements. The opposition people need equal time, and they need time with their program on state media, not to be interviewed by state people working for state media. That's a no-no. So I think, Mr. G, we are at a very interesting juncture right now, because this election that's coming, and I think it's not one election, it's 2 elections. Some people think that it could be 1 election. I think it will be 2. But I think a by-election in Roseau North first, and soon after a general election. So I can envision a situation where we might have a general election before the end of the year. We are almost into September. The reconfirmation period is coming to an end soon. And why are we here? Why are we here? Why do we don't have a proper list of voters? We don't have voter ID cards. So again, all the taints that the Caribbean Court of Justice had underscored still remain. So where are we heading to? So what it tells me in totality, the possibility of a free and fair election is quite not within our grasp right now, unless the campaigners for electoral reform hit the streets again. And we know that the repressive arm of the state will be unleashed again. So this is where we are, Mr. G, and I'm not so encouraged by the situation, but that is the context I see. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thanks a lot for establishing this context for us. I mean, Dr. Andre did establish some context. I mean, and you just did that so eloquently as well. That is why I'm going over to Simeon Joseph. Because Simeon, against this background of what Dr. Andre has outlined and what Crispin has just said about the commission and so on, and the framework in which this by-election, Roseau North, is being held, and it is not beyond imagination to conceive that there will be a general election before the end of this year. It is not beyond the imagination at all. In fact, it is probably quite realistic that it will happen before the end of the year. So your thoughts on all of this, Simeon, knowing all the things that you've been hearing about the problems in the registration and reconfirmation for the Roseau North by-election and all those things. Give us your thoughts on all this going forward.
Okay, so good evening, Mr. G, and I think my mic, is it off?
Yep, your mic is good. We're hearing you well.
My mic is on.
Yes.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Right. So good evening, Mr. G and the fellow panelists. Once again, thanks for having me. It's interesting that we are again discussing this evening, and by rightly so, you have called it a plague. Our topic for tonight is the plague that is destroying Dominica. Free and fair democratic elections, and I don't know how that word came to you, but a plague is a dangerous disease, something that is infectious, something that spreads widely, something that appears and infects other things, but most particularly brings a certain amount of death and pain. Just to look at the word, and it's amazing that is how we have to term what's happening in Dominica today. It's very sad. And I think for the first time being on your program, I felt sad when I felt of that word, what it means, something that destroys, something that causes pain, something that causes constant trouble. And so thanks for having me. And that is where I want to start tonight. I want to start not with my own opinion, but with a fact, because I think sometimes the facts can get lost in the noise. So what we are witnessing, what we may now describe as that plague, is that persistent corrosive force undermining Dominica's ability to conduct free and fair elections. And it's not new, but it has intensified with the Rosa North by-election and the looming general election. So if you recall, in July 2022, the Caribbean Court of Justice, our own apex court, reviewed how Dominica's last general election was conducted. And it warned in writing that future elections, quote, ought not to proceed with these or similar taints, meaning that it was corrupted. That's not me talking. That's not the opposition talking. That is the highest court in the region on record. So my question tonight is not, is there a problem? The court has already answered that answer. My question is, in the 4 years since, has anything actually changed? Or have we simply dressed the same problem in new legislation? Because here's what I see happening in Rosa North right now. A seat becomes vacant in June, and within days, a by-election is on the horizon. And the very first thing voters in that constituency have to deal with is a registration and a reconfirmation process that even people trying in good faith to follow the rules say is confusing and is inconsistent. I know that because I live in Rosa North. And I've seen things, I've heard things right before my very eyes. And maybe I'll speak about some of them tonight. And I should speak about some of them tonight to put some people on alert. But just to stick to the topic at hand, we were promised under the 2024 reforms, secure voter ID cards. We were promised a cleaner, more transparent register. Ask the people in Fokole, in Goodwill, in Pottersville, whether that promise has actually reached them yet. Because I don't know if you heard Danny said that he has about 500 names to register, and less than 100 have been confirmed, to confirm, and less than 100 have been confirmed. So I want to be careful here because I think credibility matters more than volume. And there are allegations swirling around this by-election that I'm not going to state tonight as proven fact because they haven't been proven. And I think our politics has suffered enough from people treating rumor as revelation. But there is a difference between an unproven allegation and a legitimate question. And I intend to ask the legitimate questions loudly and repeatedly until somebody in authority answers them, because they need to be answered. So why is it that a country that has been governed by one party for 26 years is only now in the shadow of a by-election, seeing the kind of attention to infrastructure and services that Rosa North residents have been asking for years? Why is there still no campaign finance law in this country? None, meaning a governing party with 26 years of state resources behind it and a challenger running door to door are by law treated as if they on equal footing, when everyone who is watching knows they are not. And why are the very commissioners, that arm of civil society, that group, people have called on them to step aside? Still, they are the ones who are overseeing this election, and that is frightening. So these are not radical questions. These are the same questions that the Commonwealth, the OAS, and CARICOM's own observer mission have raised in their various reports after multiple elections in Dominica. So this is not a fringe position. This is the mainstream documented concern of the very international and regional bodies that this government has invited to watch its own elections. So here's where I stand going into tonight's discussion. I don't think Dominica's problem is a lack of laws. We've passed new laws. I think Dominica's problem is a lack of independence. Independence in who administers these laws, independence in who's confirmed to vote and who isn't, and independence in who gets to hold power accountable when something goes wrong. So Mr. Byron gave recommendations. Not everyone agrees that they went far enough, and we heard that tonight from Queen, and I am included in that group. Tonight, I want to test that point by point, not with slogans, but with the actual text of the law, the actual record of the court, and the actual experience of voters trying to get reconfirmed in Roseau North right now with all its inconsistencies. We have people being confirmed without their original registration number next to their name, and that must be a must. We are not addressing the fact of diaspora voters. So we have to look at those things and what the record of the court and the actual experience of voters who are reconfirmed in Roseau North right now have to say. So I would say if the process holds up to that scrutiny, I'll say it on air, that if it doesn't, the country deserves to hear that too. But make no mistake about it, this is not just about Roseau North. This is a test of whether the people of Dominica can trust the very system that is supposed to translate their vote into their voice. And should anyone believe that the playing field between a governing party with 26 years of incumbency and challengers running on a shoestring is anything close to level, we see it happening. I have heard that there's a prominent gentleman in Santa Roma, Upper Goodwill, is currently registering people from not living in Goodwill on his downstairs apartment. And I'm saying this tonight to put him on notice. I have heard that this same gentleman is going to prominent families in Goodwill and asking for the names and addresses of their children so that tickets can be bought to send down to vote. He did it the last time and he's doing it again. And I'm putting him on notice tonight that he is known. Names will not be mentioned, but who the cap fit must wear it. I am hearing that there are people who are being transferred, Spanish residents in Dominica. No wonder why there was a fast tracking to give them their passports. I'm hearing that Haitians have been brought in to vote in Roseau North. And these are what you call concrete rumors. I'll call them rumors tonight, although there has been physical evidence that I have seen, as we say in Dominica, of my tukukozi, and been told by some of these parents who has been contacted by this prominent former Freedomite on all the boards in Dominica, living in Santa Roma, asking people to bring down their children. So I am saying this tonight because we're looking at the fact that when we're talking about a level playing field, you know what it means. When we think of I watched that forum last week, and we have the candidate for the incumbent government party addressing the audience as we. She hasn't won yet, but she's saying we. The government has. We. That says something. Under the same breath saying we're not involved in transactional politics. That is something. So it's not a level playing field. So the question I want to ask in my last few statements on all what we discussed is, can Dominicans trust that the next ballot they cast in Roseau North and in the general election that will follow will actually count and count fairly? So I could say Dominica is at a crossroads. And if we do not confront these issues now, openly, honestly, and courageously, we risk losing the very essence of our democracy. Because that's what your topic is tonight. A plague that is destroying Dominica's free and fair democratic elections. Democratic elections is what the essence of democracy rests on. So we must discuss this openly and honestly. And when we look and we listen to the case that was won yesterday in the courts of the non-appointment of a leader of the opposition, it hinges on that. It hinges on democracy. So we have abuse of power by every strata in society. Elections play a part in ensuring that there is no abuse of power. We saw today the abuse of power in the presentation of the budget is a violation of the Constitution, and a violation where it says that the budget must be presented before the end of the financial year. We're going, opposition person file an injunction. An injunction should have been filed in the court to prevent them from having a budget address today because the Constitution has been violated. It's time we start using the law against those who are abusing the law. I'm not sure if that is the right legal position to take, but this is all what we're talking about, you know. This is the destruction of a free and fair democratic elections. And if we don't confront these issues now, openly and honestly, we risk losing the very essence of our democracy. And it's an every strategy. So free and fair elections are not optional. They are the backbone of a functioning society. And so this plague that is undermining our elections can be cured, but only if we acknowledge it, we address it, and we demand better.
Thank you, Simeon, for these wonderful opening remarks there tonight. And thank you all these folks who are with us on Facebook. We see some of your comments. We'll probably try to read a couple of them a little later on. But I want to go now to IP Pascal, ENT specialist. And he has some other credentials that I'm not sure that I want to mention yet. But I mean, certainly we'll probably go into that a little bit later tonight. But Dr. IP, you know, Simeon, I mean, you saw the context that Dr. Andre established for us. You saw the context that Crispin outlined as well. And you saw the framework which Simeon developed there. I mean, he spoke about one thing in particular, the lack of independence of the Electoral Commission. And a lot of other independence is lacking as well. But that one struck me as the crucial one because the work of the Electoral Commission in supervising elections, free and fair democratic elections, is paramount. Now, in terms of the residency requirement, and then, you know, Crispin mentioned that matter of diaspora people coming in to vote and being induced to come to vote. Well, so here's the question. With the residency requirement in the past electoral laws now abolished, because that is no longer there, should we expect large numbers of diaspora-based Dominicans to continue accepting inducements such as free transportation and stipends from the ruling party to show up the vote? So in your remarks, Dr. Pascal, maybe you might want to just address that, but I know also But you might want to make a passing comment on this matter of reparations because Dr. Irvin Andre did mention that earlier and so on. So let's your opening remarks. You wanna unmute your mic. Your mic is muted.
My mic.
Okay. Excellent.
Greetings to you, Mr. G, and to the rest of the panel. First, I'd like to thank you for what do you call it? What's the name of the program again? Global View on Q.
Yep.
For giving me another opportunity to honor my ancestors in this season of emancipation. I'd first like to start by thanking you all for that because you asked me to talk about reparations. Well, during the emancipation season, there was very little talk or very little activities or actions related to reparations, which is an obvious disappointment, and I will leave it there for now. I always felt that the rest of the panel were much more qualified than me to address the issue and the talking points on the panel. So what I did, unlike Simeon, I decided to become very opinionated on the topic. And that's where I'll go. But my simple response to the topic, the plague that is destroying Dominica's free and fair democratic elections, and I underline democratic because most of what I will say will be related to that word more than anything else. I would say the influence, in one simple word sentence, the influence of mismanaged CBI funds in the absence of campaign finance reform and elections presided over by an electoral commission that I describe, and as I said, that I describe as corrupt, inept, incompetent, and politicized. That is to me the plague that I see that is involved with the free and fair democratic elections in Dominica. But because, as I said, that the other panelists are much more qualified than me to discuss these things, and I'm very careful about narrowing that space between opinion and expertise, I thought I would enlarge the democracy, the elections, to the whole democratic process. What I saw as the plague to the democratic process in Dominica, which includes the elections. And I hope I can sort of tie it together. I hope I can tie it together to include the elections as well. When I look at it, elections, voting, free and fair elections, what else? Freedom of the press, and I thank you, Mr. G, for the work you guys do. What's the other one? Civil society involvement and an independent judiciary is supposed to be the tenets of a democracy. And I hasten to say that the plague I see, and plague, I take seriously Simeon's definition, being a physician and all of that. The plague that I see is really centered around who we are and who we have become as Dominicans. That's where I see the plague, beyond just the electoral process, the elections per se, and extended into who we are or who we have become. And why I say that is because my opinion is that the majority of us, maybe most of us, all of us to a certain degree, or the majority behavior of the majority of Dominicans, is that we seem to have developed an appetite that we enjoy sacrificing others for our well-being, a kind of Sukuya mentality, you know. The Sukuya sucks the blood in our culture for its well-being and never sheds its own blood for its well-being. So for me, that is the larger play beyond the mismanagement of CBI funds. The way we have developed a culture of sacrificing others for our well-being, particularly, and it's interesting that the Roseau North election, the Roseau by-election, or the election in whatever, in the Roseau North has been mentioned so many times. Because I see it played out there all the time, particularly as this cannibalization of each other as it refers to young people. And it's interesting because the other tenets of the democracy really, the majority of the so-called democratic process really is about adults. It's really about adults at the end of the day. So there are no young people, very few young people who are part of the judiciary. There are very few young people who are part of the free press, and there are very few young people who are part of adult civil society. So it's a problem of the adults in our society that this cannibalization of each other for our well-being, we've now focused it on the young people. So we end up right now, in my view, cannibalizing the young people. And you can see what's happening in Roseau North. When I looked at that forum, that's the first thing that came to me. That here we were again sacrificing two young people whose futures would be bleak vis-a-vis the political process they were involving themselves in Roseau North. Because most likely they're going to have difficulties winning, and even if they won, so what? So, to my view, it is something that we need to look at how we behave as Dominicans vis-a-vis this whole democratic process. The other part of it that's alarming, and I don't think we address it, is the fact that the adults in the society, in this democratic process, not prepared to put themselves on the line, not prepared to put their well-being on the line, not prepared to shed their blood. But yet, we out there castigating the young people for disengaging. We out there criticizing them for not being part of it. And we confuse their maybe perception, in my view, of, I'm not going to get involved in that cannibalism. These people just sucking our blood and then throwing us on the path. Look at all the young people who've been involved in the political process over the last 20, 25 years. What has happened to any of them? Even if they're a little bit more financially well off, their lives as human beings have been severely compromised. And then we sit down there and we say that the young people, the present group of young people who refuse to engage in this Sukuya business we involve in, that I call it, we say they're apathetic, not recognizing that what we describe as apathy is a rejection of our approach to this whole democratic process, or even our daily lives. Because if they were apathetic, there would be no way that this bike festival that happened in Dominica this weekend could have been so successful. The same people who put that energy in the bike festival, if they put that in the democratic process, Mr. Skerritt would have been out of power a long time ago. So I am saying that is the plague I see. And I would like to take the opportunity to shout out the young people who organized this thing, that when I drove by, I couldn't believe it. And as far as I'm aware, I haven't heard any negative reports that It seemed to have been on the surface successful, I don't know financially, but the usual negative that comes out of those things, I haven't heard them. And I'm saying that is for me the larger plague that Simeon describes, more so than my little initial diagnosis of mismanagement of CBI funds, which allows, which affects the financing of campaigns, because I understand, or it seems to me, or I would infer from available information, that a lot of money from the campaigns of the Labour Party in power comes from CBI sources. I don't see them holding any barbecues or whatever, so I don't know where the money comes from. So I must assume it comes from the CBI, since that seems to be the only source of money that comes into Dominica. And it's those same mismanaged CBI funds that allows that electoral commission to survive so long. But I'm saying the cancer, the plague, is much more than the mismanagement of the CBI funds, because that is what drives, to me, the mismanagement of the CBI funds. It's the same kind of greediness. At the same time, I, for myself, I'm not going to sacrifice for nobody else. I'm going, winner takes all. Let's compete. I want to have the most, and to hell with everybody else. So that, for me, is my diagnosis of what the plague looks like. And I can't do much about the other diagnoses. I don't have any funds to be mismanaged, but I hope I can now come up with some treatments for the plague. Or you know, you have to manage the plague as a physician. You must at least try something or do something. But that, I think, is important for us to look at, and is really and truly who we are and what we have become in Dominica as adults in the society.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for those opening remarks. When you come back the second time around, you will tell us a little bit more about the what you would do to manage those particular things that you mentioned. But I want to go to Dr. Andre, but just before I do, I want to go over to Lambi for him to give out the telephone numbers so our audience can maybe give us a call if they would like to participate in the discussion tonight. Lambi?
The Global View on Q taking your calls at this moment. The numbers are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are all local numbers. The international or overseas number is as follows: 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers again: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. Back to you, Mr. G.
Okay, all right. So if there's a call coming in, you'll just make us a signal, Lambi, and we'll pay attention to you and we'll take the call. Dr. Andre, I want to get your further thoughts on the topic here tonight, because you've listened to Simeon, you've heard Crispin, and you've heard IP. Really describe this plague that is haunting us, haunting our free and fair general elections or democratic elections in Dominica. But I wanted to also ask you, Dr. Andre, to identify some of the areas in the new electoral laws passed in Parliament in May 25 that are considered not to be conducive to free and fair electoral context for Dominica, if you may.
Well, some of those measures have been mentioned already. The conspicuous absence of campaign finance reform. That is deliberate, it is intentional, and it is designed to ensure that things continue. Now, one of the things which certain persons who have presented themselves as candidates, they've observed, and I made reference to the supplementary electors list, where there is no mention of the addresses of the electors. That is also by design. because they're relying on one or two court decisions, and most recently a high court decision, which basically said there is no residency qualification. The Constitution doesn't stipulate any residential component or criterion to elect. That is one decision. It's a high court decision, and I say so with the greatest of respect. I don't know why it will stand. I don't think it will stand. Why? Because if you think of it, it removes all criterion for someone to be able to vote in Roseau North. It means, for example, with Arundel Thomas's permission, someone living in Lac Lang can be parachuted into the jurisdiction to vote, and someone living in every nook and cranny in Dominica, and someone living in every nook and cranny in the diaspora. So what that cynical interpretation causes is a continuation of what we've had since 2005. That is to say, an incumbent cynically stuffing the voting list, stuffing it like a turkey to ensure and to guarantee the success of the candidate of that incumbent party. And it raises the further question, if that is what passes as legal in terms of voting, then why have an election? If one side can engage in these types of practices, then what chance does the other side, the other competitors, what chance do they have to prevail? What is the significance of the vote of someone who's resided in Roseau North for 20, 30, 40, 50 years? The vote will become meaningless. We're talking about a democracy. The democracy is how you express your choices. The democracy is the voting process is your voice. In some countries, leaders have said the voting process constitutes or is tantamount to the voice of God. Really. It is the most sacrosanct asset in a democracy. The inviolability of the right to vote. And the imperative of ensuring that the vote of every constituent counts. And is not diluted by someone who lives, God knows in which part of St. Martin, who is enjoying all the benefits of living in St. Martin, who pontificates and talk a whole set of nonsense that by calling the radio stations in Dominica, and then come and vote, and then go back, obviously. They don't stay there. No, hardship is not for them. They go right back into the land where they're enjoying benefits that Dominicans on the ground do not enjoy. The electoral process cannot be a way for the legalization of theft in the voting process. It cannot be that way of the normalization of rigging the electoral process. Again, I ask, in what other country in the Eastern Caribbean do you have that cynical and capricious approach to the whole question of voting? None other. I ask, or I would want to send a message to Arundel Thomas if he's listening tonight. Do you have that type of practice in Lac Lang? I think he will tell me unequivocally, no.
Now, Dr.
This to happen.
Dr. Andre, you did mention the voters list. I mean, Crispin also mentioned the voters list, and I wanted to go back to this question, because the current reconfirmation exercise on the way is really fraught with irregularities and malpractices that call into question its legitimacy. Obviously, the legitimacy of this thing is really in question now. Will this actually bring forth a new voters register that meets international best practices, in your opinion?
Of course not. It's a perversion of best practices. It's a negation of it. It's the very antithesis of best practices. And it is not so by accident. That's the point. It is so by design. If you look at the Constitution or those who form the Electoral Commission, They all have legal, well, most of them anyway, have legal backgrounds. And that knowledge has been put to under the employ of those who seek to subvert and destroy the electoral process. So bear in mind that this is a fight. This is a fight we have to devote as much resources as we possibly can. Much is at stake. There's reference to, Dr. IP talked about greed, which is perhaps the fundamental justification for that state of affairs. He's absolutely correct. Financial gain, feathering the individual nests, that appears to be just the justification. And the evidence is clear. Even those who come on radio asking about whether or not government can engage in good practices. Look around Roseau. Look around those. Go to the registry, for God's sakes, who are registering properties, who have access to funds which cannot be explained by the legitimate sources of income. Where is the IPO? Totally silent. They have basically surrendered their responsibility. It's almost probably worse than an accountant who for 5 years never submitted not a single report, which he was statutorily obliged to do for approximately 5 years. And he's been reemployed. He is reemployed. So here's what we have. This is what we have. Those who feather the nests, those who provide the scaffolding for what is wrong in Dominican governance. These are the folks who are counted. Didn't you have an Inspector Week say something in a church a few years ago? Those in the police force who receive attention and notice and promotion, it is those who work in accordance, not with the dictates of their office, but with the dictates of their political bosses. And that is part of the whole thing. Dominicans have lovely sayings. One of them, it goes, how it goes again? I think that is Chinese. I think so, and that's exactly what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. Simeon talked about some big guy, big in stature and God knows name. And that's another repercussion of what we have passing in governance. The perversion of so many folks we traditionally regarded as bourgeois. Persons of standing, persons of high moral rectitude. And some of them, not all of them, saying that openly. There are many who've resisted the temptation to sell their souls for a mess of potash. But by the same token, there are some who've done everything. They have sacrificed their morals for a few dollars more, or for a job here, or to be on a board there, I don't know. And they have enabled that type of governance in Dominica. And who suffers the most? Those who cannot pay DOMLEC or the WASCO. These are the folks who suffered most. And somebody made reference to the budget. The budget will be a pre-electoral budget. The budget, you will think that Santa Claus visited Dominica today, because there will be all kinds of gifts to blind people from the neglect of 26 years. And the same thing will happen again. And my final point, Mr. G, one beautiful electoral promise would be, everyone who's turned 21 years, we will give them $20,000. Didn't somebody say so a few years ago? Where is that money? 5 years ago, according to Simeon. Where is that money? What about a $500? Not even that. We talked about Roseau North. Didn't somebody promise some big sports facility at Stock Farm about 10 years ago? Where is that facility? Nobody knows. Nobody sees. If I may borrow a phrase from Father Sharpley, let me make the sign of the cross. What about the facility at Lindo Park, where an Australian non-profit organization had promised thousands of dollars to fix it? who blocked it, who destroyed it, and it was being given to Dominica gratis. So we understand, and I hope some of these things are brought to the attention or reminding Dominicans in that constituency exactly what has happened. And they can rethink and they can assess the promises being made now with a very cynical air, or very cynical eye, or a very cynical mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andre. Crispin, your further thoughts on the topic? Yeah, your mic
what I wanted to address as related to this question, Mr. G, is how the current reconfirmation exercise, it is no accident that is the course of action that the ruling party chose out of two options towards a new voters register, a new voters list. There were two options. One option was, in my view, the more democratic option would have been to do a complete re-registration of voters. So you make sure that everybody in every house who is 18 years old and older would register because they live in the country. You see, one of the things is the diaspora voters, the diaspora. You can tell me, I want to know, in this reconfirmation exercise, the government chose that because they saw advantage for them. And the backdrop to a new list is not to start afresh, as Antigua has showed us they were able to do in 2 to 3 months, to re-register everybody, but use the old list, the old tainted list, a list that has more people on it than the total population, a list that has at least 20,000 people who are deceased, a list under which people were voting on dead people's names. I know the operatives of the ruling party in the Virgin Islands. They gave people names, not their name not on the list. They give them a ticket. They're going to X constituency, whether it's Grand Bay, La Plaine. They give you a name and tell you that's the name for you to vote. Now there are no ID cards. So you just show up and say, I'm Tom Brown. Tom Brown is on the list, and you vote. Now, that's ludicrous. How could be in 2022? Because that's when the last election was held, even though that was a fraudulent vote election. And people are voting on dead people's names. And that is the list we are using as the basis to have a new list. Now, here's where the Electoral Commission is found wanting, Mr. G. First of all, I fault even the two representatives of the opposition on the commission for not standing their ground on this one. And that is, how could the Labour Party, the cabinet, be the one to decide that who will be employed in the reconfirmation process? In the reconfirmation process, we should have, for every person who has a Labour Party affiliation or orientation, there should be one person from the opposition. So that in the confirmation center, the opposition will be represented in the confirmation center and the ruling party. That is the composition of the Electoral Commission. So you have 100% of the people employed doing the reconfirmation are Labour Party people. So you're starting off with a major taint. And so that is the first thing. The second thing, when you go to reconfirm, there is a problem in that you must have a witness, somebody who voted in that constituency, to come with you. So you have to make an appointment with somebody to go with you. I had that problem. I wanted to reconfirm when I was there, but my name is on the Maho list because I used to live in Canefield. But Marc a wè tan Dominique. So ma konet person mwen sa mande pou ale veman pou mwen fè an reconfirmation. You can see the problem. I could not, let me go back to English so that I can explain what I just said. I wanted to reconfirm, but because I don't live in Dominica, I don't know somebody that I would ask them to make some time to go with me for me to reconfirm. So that's the second problem. The third problem is that after you reconfirm, the people who are going to review and vet your name are Labour Party people. So they can decide, oh, this guy, he'll vote for opposition, so we're not going to give him an ID card. And fourth, where are the ID cards after you reconfirm? Has anybody in Dominica gotten an ID card after they reconfirm? So the election process is already tainted. And Roseau North is a test case. I can see legal problems with the laws. There are a lot of irregularities in the very law that they wrote. And that has to be challenged. I don't know if we have enough time to do it for this by-election, but we should. We shouldn't let anything go to chance. So that process we are in is illegitimate and fraught with a lot of irregularities. So that's the thing. Now, the question now is, what do the opposition forces who've been fighting for electoral reform, what do we do next? We are at a perilous moment. We've been in the streets. You see what happened last year, May 19th, I believe. The Dominican people are ready to fight for their rights, you know. It's just that the repressive arm of the state is unleashed on them. But there will come a point in time when the repressive arm of the state, those guys who are dressed in military fatigues as though they are soldiers, I'd love to send them to Haiti. That's where I want to send them. They're so bad, some of them. They're so mean and using rubber bullets and tear gas and rocks on people. People who are just exercising their democratic right. So, Mr. G, I'm afraid that we are on the brink of a civil conflict. And this election could well bring that civil conflict if it does not go well.
Christine, can we just take a call from Lambie?
Yes, sure.
Good evening, caller. Please go ahead.
Yeah, gentlemen, blessings to you all and thanks for service to country and humanity.
Blessings to you.
I appreciate your effort. What would you refer to it? A virus or disease? What's the word?
A plague.
The description?
A plague.
A plague.
Oh, plague. Quite parasitically so, eh? It's a plague and it's coupled as a parasite. So I just want to give thanks. I'm listening to brilliant minds articulating that plague, and with perfect description, everything falls in parallel with the madness. So I want to give thanks because I know a lot of us think it is too difficult or it is dangerous. How can you go up against Goliath? Oh, David, you must be careful. Everybody seems to be so fearful of standing for country. You're not in a foreign land. You're in your country where you was born and raised. You're a national of a country that is going through hell as a plague, a parasitic plague, and then you're fearful. So I want to ask one of the panelists a question, because it seems like the reservation does not cut it, and how long you're going to be reserved. And I've asked them several times, why not? You know, I mean, it's a sacrifice. It's not the ultimate sacrifice I'm asking for, but Dr. Pascal, with his potential. Even man like Simeon Joseph, and I know Dr. Andre, you know, he's not here, Sheridan not here, and all of that. But Doc, when will you, as a medical person, you're dealing with, you're dealing with an illness, you're dealing with a plague, quite parasitically so. When will a medical doctor like you decide, you know something, this is my country. No matter how much terrorists or Navy SEALs or criminals, passport wheelers or dealers, I'm going to stand up. Will you ever one day make up your mind, Doc, and say, I am willing to serve more than I have served already as a medical doctor? Thank you, gentlemen, and blessings. And thank you very, very, very much for the effort. Blessings.
And thank you so much for your contribution here tonight. Your comment is really, really, really well taken. And your question to Dr. Pascal is well placed. And I was going to go back to Crispin, but I will go to Dr. IP to answer that question. I think you said something, Dr. IP, about the apathy, that perceived apathy from the young people. But then again, you see this gentleman is calling and asking you, Dr. IP, in other words, his way of saying, will you put your name in the ring? So unmute your mic and maybe you might want to answer that.
Before I answer that, let the universe massage that for a bit.
Okay.
I'll come to blessings before I end here tonight. I will answer it. I would just like to go back to the whole issue of my perspective on the plague and use what's happening in Roseau North to illustrate some examples of that. If you look at and I really commend them for that, the Dominica Business Forum, for the attempt to reintroduce civil society into this whole thing about the electoral process and organizing the forum that they organize. And I think that was commendable because it's something I personally lamented for a long time, the going away of the civil society in all the discussions. You're not hearing hardly hearing anybody from civil society or civil society organizations, as used to happen before, weighing in on the issues, on the current realities, on the future possibilities, the future insecurities. And so I commend the Dominica Business Forum for that attempt. But when you look at it, if you go back to what I'm saying, I think it could have been much. It reflects what I think is the failure of the adults who involved in this thing to go the extra mile. Because number one, I think there were only, I don't know how many young people they got to come into that forum. That's number one. But number two, maybe I have high expectations. I would have expected questions to come from the Dominica Business Forum, the adults in the Dominica Business Forum. There were two young people on the stage besides Danny. And questions with their perspectives on the current realities in Dominica that affect the business people and the future possibilities, the future insecurities. And those questions now would be placed to the three panelists who would then give their opinions and views of how they would tackle or what were their views, so that regardless of whoever won, the contribution from the business forum would be taken into the policy making. But that's not what happened. So that's why I talk about, and then you had a situation where one of the young panelists, who was an independent, and I mean, obviously I'm biased towards independence, and we spoke about that earlier, got 25 tickets to hand out to people to come. The other panelists, because they happen to be in parties, got 50 tickets. I mean, I'm saying, but what? How is that? Number one, why would the Dominica Business Forum act like that? So what happens at the end of the day? The whole, to me, my critique of the whole thing was that at the end of the day, all you had was the usual competition to get votes. That divides us all the time, rather than an opportunity to hear the views of the civil society, of a civil society organization that incumbents could weigh in on. Everybody come to a consensus. This is the one thing the civil society would like to happen in Roseau North, and that's going to happen. So that's what I'm talking about, the retreat. That was the word I was looking for earlier, of civil society and the press and all of that in this whole democratic process. And then we turn around, I wouldn't say we turn around and say the young people not interested, because the young people are smarter than that. In my view, the young people are smarter than that. The young people refuse to do that anymore. And they're not coming to save us this time. So it means there needs to be more given than taken. There needs to be more concern about others and doing more of what we can do to deal with this problem. So a lot of us are doing lots of things, but to me it seems that based on if what happened in Roseau North is an example for what's going to happen in the general elections, and we think young people are going to come to save us, I think we better think otherwise. We have to get up and do the work, do more, sacrifice more, work twice as hard if we want to change this thing.
All right. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for those remarks.
I'll come to blessings. I'll reply to blessings in my closing remarks.
You will answer the question. You will answer the question. You will answer the question before we leave here tonight.
I'll do my best.
All right. So, all right. Thanks a lot, IP. Crispin, you want to make to wrap up your own comments that you will in the midst of making? You need to unmute your mic.
Lambi has a call though.
Lambi, you have a call?
The person has been waiting for a while. Let's see if he's still there. Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening, Dominica. I gotta tell all you brothers, all you trying hard. You know, I listen to Dr. Pascal. I listen to Mr. Andrew. I listen to all those panelists. You all are trying hard. The truth about it, Roosevelt carried half Dominicans hostage. He had them hostage politically. He had them hostage financially. He had them hostage physically. In other words, Roosevelt carried has armed the Dominica police force against the citizens of Dominica for them not to protest. That's the first place he worked hard at. My brother, where we are today, the Roseau North have the back of the Dominican people to answer that question to us. America is on our case. Europe is on our case. We are in a serious position where we are now because of Roosevelt's character. And Roosevelt's character will do anything to remain in power. The people of Roseau North, you have a choice to save Dominica. Dominica's future lies in all your hands, whether you're young or you're old. What Roosevelt's character doing now, the work that he's doing now, it is not now he's doing that. He's doing that for every politics are taking place in Dominica. Every election, he finds time to spend millions of dollars to bribe the people. risen up. Roosevelt carried for the past 10 years have been putting $300 million in his office. So this man alone spent over $2 billion in his office. Roosevelt carried has sold over 51,000 passports, U.S. currency. Up to today, he can look you in your eye and tell you how much money derives from this passport that was being sold. Roosevelt carried sold diplomatic passports to people that is a high risk against the West, including America, England, and Europe. Dominica, take Roosevelt's spirit and his government serious. The work that he's doing is not going to bring no dividend to us. He has been trying that for years. If Roosevelt carried had a $1 billion economy for the last 20 years, how can we cannot service our debt? Why our debt is so high, 106% to GDP? Roosevelt carried is trying to propaganda that, you know, all what China is doing is using Roosevelt carried for Dominica to remain with China because campaign financing. Roosevelt carried deliberately did not put it because he always said China is his best friend. And China giving him money without. They check that money, check some balances. So he will do anything to remain like that without campaign financing. Dominicans, our back is against the wall. America, Europe, all of them is looking at who we're going to vote. And where you vote will decide their decision from there going on. He has to only bubble with the passport. No, he going now to have meeting with Europe. I am telling you, this thing is not going down well. For Dominica to go, for Dominica to grow, for things to change, for us to show a different perspective to the world, Roosevelt and his entire government have to beckon from that position and they will participate in politics. Dominica, let us do it. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much for that. Lam, do you have another call? No? All right. So, Crispin, you want to wrap up your comments?
Yes, I wanted to say that we are back at the position that occurred in the 2018-2019 period, leading to that election that all the parties, the two parties participated in, not the 2022 election. And that is, things got so hot in Dominica. I don't know if the Dominican people understood clearly that election was discussed at a special meeting of the Organization of American States in Washington. And two things I remember that stuck in my head. The first one is that the CARICOM countries didn't see anything wrong with what the ruling party was doing in terms of ensuring that the taints that the Caribbean Court of Justice underscored. The CARICOM countries, their statement in that session supported those taints. And I couldn't believe it because in their own countries, they would not tolerate it. Right? So that was one. But here's the most important one, I think. That was during the first Trump administration. And the Trump administration then, now some people, I'm not making any judgment on Mr. Trump. There's some things he does I don't agree with, and there's something he does that I agree with. And that is, the Trump ambassador at the UN said, at the OAS, not the UN, the OAS, that Dominica must not have an election until it completes the reforms. Dominica must not hold that election in 2019 because they had more time. They had many more months and they could have done the reforms, and the Trump administration was insisting on that. But Roosevelt Skerrit went ahead and did the election anyway. Here we are in 2026, and the Trump administration is back in power. I believe that there's an opportunity for the opposition forces to advocate to the Trump administration to say, in your backyard, there is a dictatorship that you need to dislodge, because that dictatorship, they are not capable of having a free and fair election. But we must go further than that. So the Trump administration, I can see them being an ally with the opposition democratic forces in Dominica. But we have to go to the Commonwealth, and there is a change at the Commonwealth. Their friend Baroness Scotland is no longer there. The current Secretary General is a Ghanaian woman, and I know some of her people, and I know that she would embrace the opposition, and even the possibility of if Dominica does not hold a free and fair election, they stand to lose their status in the Commonwealth. I want them to know that. CARICOM, I already said what CARICOM status is. We cannot trust CARICOM. There are other institutions that must be alerted well before a general election. We have the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance in Stockholm, Sweden. We have the Human Rights Watch, we have Amnesty International, and a host of democracy rights non-governmental organizations. And other states, like Canada, like Mexico, must be advocated to. We cannot sit down in Roseau and do nothing. This administration must be held to account. I'm saying all of this, Mr. G, because I foresee that we are on the edge of a precipice. We could have a civil conflict in Dominica over this next election if it's not free and fair. Thank you.
And thanks a lot for that, Crispin. Simeon, your further thoughts on this. I know you have a lot more that you want to contribute to the discussion here tonight. Give us your further thoughts on the topic here tonight. Your mic is muted. You need to unmute your mic. Yeah, it's muted. It's muted. Right now you're good. No, you muted again. Now you're good. Now you're good. No, but you muted again. You see? Okay, keep it that up. Keep it that way now.
It's muted.
No, you just muted again.
Well,
yeah. All right.
No,
Okay.
it's well, not much actually, except to say that we're discussing a very pivotal topic tonight, and I would like to say that the election in Goodwill, Roseau North, needs to serve as a signal. After all what we've discussed tonight, needs to serve as a signal, because I am one person who has always held, and Crispin alluded to the fact, or Dr. Andre, that since 2005, people have been, but that happened a lot in 2000 as well. I witnessed in the Wesley and the Vegas constituency when a very good friend of mine from Penville was actually shuttling people back and forth on his brown Toyota Hiace bus at the time to shift votes around. But I mean, one of the things I'd like to say is that, if anything, a number of questions need to be raised, and that has been raised before. I'm at odd ends to think as to whether this current government and the Prime Minister will actually hold a by-election in Roseau North before the confirmation process is over. That would say a lot. I would say tremendous a lot. Something also is very strange, you know, that the former Parliament for Goodwill resigned. She tendered her resignation according to the Constitution to the Speaker of the House. But I haven't heard anything about the seat being declared vacant yet. Okay, and who is to do that? At what stage it is to be done before the Prime Minister can call for a by-election in Roseau North? These are questions we have to ask. So again, we see a situation where those in power are basically abusing their position of power to leave people in Dominica at limbo before they proceed to do anything. I have heard from reliable sources that United Airlines is due to resume their flights to Dominica in October. However, there are 2 days in September that they have 2 flights booked. I don't know what that signals. It's confirmed. Because if you speak to people who have the inside information. So here we are again. It's another example of our government that is again abusing its power. I have been in close contact with the candidate for the United Workers' Party for Roseau North, and he shared with me a lot of discrepancies in the confirmation process and the re-registration process. I have understood that in one of the areas for confirmation, there are 2 names of people who are very closely associated with the government stuck on the wall. And when people come to confirm, they just have to write down those names there without bringing people, as other people have been asked to do. That has been tried, that has been tested, that has been proven. Because I have a very good friend who currently lives out of Dominica who came down to confirm. And I'll reveal tonight, she was a former Labourite. And they thought that she could just reconfirm. So nobody came with her and they just gave her a name to put on her thing. So these are calling out discrepancies tonight, because if we keep our heads on the ground, we need to let these people know under no uncertain terms that they know we are aware of their dirty work. For too long, we remain silent. For too long, we speak about things. But I think the time is now when everybody who knows anything wrong that is happening must call it out. Because we have to let them know that we know what they are doing. I have understood that justices of the peace have been appointed just for that. Just for that. And so that's another question we have to ask and we have to investigate. So in all of this, I'm saying to say that when we talk about a plague, it is a plague. Just by what I defined it tonight. Because that's kind of a cancerous infestation of a major and important system and process in Dominica that this current government has abused, misused, and basically thrown away to the dog. So that's my thoughts on this. But I began by saying, I think the test must be in goodwill, where I'm hoping that the people of goodwill will prove to this government that will be the first domino that will fall and should signal a change the things to come. I think the people of Roseau North are so diverse in many ways, background, economic standing, education, talent, and everything. I think that's the best constituency to begin to send a clear message to the government in power that when this by-election is called, we signal to them that the people of Dominica have had enough after 26 years. I am never one to claim that this Dominica Labour Party has won any election, because the playing field has never been level. We know of the shenanigans and all the corrupt practices that they have used to win elections, brought in voters, transferred voters, all those kind of things. So they have never won an election. And we must never give them the credit and the accolade of referring that they have won an election. They must never feel good in that posture. They must always be reminded that they have been losers all along who have stolen victory by all these sorts of nefarious and high-handed ways of winning an election. We look at in Grand Four, in Wesley, Cassie Bruce in the last election. I mean, you recounted votes how many times just to ensure that Teacher Ernie lost an election. Look at that. Look at what they have done in St. Joseph. Look at what they have done in Roseau. Look at what they have there. There were prominent families in Virgin Lane in the last election distributing envelopes to people. I mean, so they can. It's known. We must let them know that, because when we keep these things quiet, what we are actually doing is letting them off the hook. We need to know that they are aware of these things. And so I'm never going to say that I acknowledge the fact that this Labour Party has never won an election. And if anything, the Goodwill constituency, as I said, must be the first domino to fall for them coming in the election, and to teach them that in spite of all the odds, that the people of Dominica are a thing. But we need that. We need to have a change, not just for the sake of having a change, but the fact that you mention clearly, I mean, your sentence tonight is so poignant. Plague, destroying. You know, these are two things that resonates with me tonight. And I think that when we look at the situation in Dominica today, it's only an election that's going to save us, But what kind of election is it going to be? How are we going to approach future elections? I think we have laid down for too long. I think we have been pretty complacent for too long. I think to some degree we have been using too much of the old politics of the 70s in trying to deal with this very anachronistic kind of government. I think we have to devise new measures and new schemes to ensure that we bowl them for six and leave them wondering what happened, because of the fact for too long there's been abuse of power, privilege, position, opportunity, everything. And that's my take. My other take tonight, apart from looking at all the things that are happening in Goodwill currently. And it's worrisome, very worrisome, because when you hear the things that are happening, when you get the evidence, I mean, look at how Danny was able to observe double registration in Goodwill, okay? And they hurried up and denied it. And next thing they had to come and say it was a glitch. What is it? A glitch in the system? Because they realized that they were caught this time. And so that's what we have to continue to do. We have to advocate for those kind of things to let them know that they have no way out. That's what I'd recommend.
Thanks a lot, Simeon. I'm going to make it around now and take some closing remarks. I hope you'll be able to stick around to give closing remarks. But let me go to Dr. IP for his closing remarks. Dr. IP?
Sorry. Right. I'd like to endorse fully those last comments of Simeon. And because it fits in nicely with what I thought would be my treatment for the plague, or my version of the plague. And if the adults in this society were to embrace the spirit of Marcus Garvey in this emancipation season, and that spirit was a spirit of self-reliance and self-determination, but the slogan for that was, if it is to be, it is up to me. That would bring us the vision or the results of the vision that Simeon just described. I think it's going to depend on each and every one of us adopting that motto of Marcus Garvey, that if it is to be, It is up to me. And we will do the right thing. We will stop sacrificing others for our well-being. We will sacrifice ourselves for our well-being. By extension, I will also say, in response to Blessing's question, I will adopt the same thing for myself. That if it is to be, it is up to me. So that will be my position going forward. But I also would caution that for me, future is always possibility, never definitive.
That sounds like a very vague statement.
Well, that's my answer to the question, Mr. G.
Okay.
But what I will add to that is that I consider that the greatest threat to the future security of Dominica is every day this government stays in power. And wherever and whenever I can contribute the most to ensure we change the government, that's where I will be. Blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, IP, for this. Well, I'm not so sure how to describe that statement in response to Blessing's question, but let us all hope that in terms of Simeon's maybe anticipation of what the Roseau North voters will do, let us hope they do the right thing, so we can all look forward to that. Crispin, your closing remarks?
Yes, well, Mr. G, just to say that for a good part of my life, I tend to be an optimist. And I'm hoping that reason is going to prevail in Dominica. We are at a point in time when the administration in Roseau is facing international sanctions because of their own doing. And I am of the view that should the Dominican people make the mistake of re-electing that government, they are going to re-elect, they would be doing an act to re-elect a government that will be incapable of dealing with the sanctions that are on them right now. That is the impending loss of the CBI and the travel ban on Dominica that has brought, by the Trump administration, that has brought a total suspension of visas for Dominicans, whether it's student visas. Unfortunately, no Dominican students, unless they had green cards, could go to university this year this school year starting this month of August. None. That should make the young people in Dominica angry at the administration, the folly of this administration.
Exactly.
And then further, all that money that was generated by the CBI that's not in our coffers needs to be brought back. And this government is incapable of bringing it back. It's only a new government that can do that. So I just wish Dominica well, and I believe that order is going to prevail in Dominica. But the Dominican people must force forward that order. Good night. Thank you very much.
And thanks a lot, Crispin, for those very, very thoughtful remarks. Simeon, your closing remarks?
Well, my closing remarks, I mean, once again, we've come to the juncture where our core values are being put to the test. I want to take a page from the statement by Dr. IP. Who we are and what have we become. And every time one is to reflect on the way things are in Dominica and how things are going on, you know, it amazes me that we almost have to reinvent society. It almost seems to me that we have to reinvent Dominica all over again. We have thrown so many things out of the baby with the bath water. And when I think of a country of Dominica that was once a champion of democracy, a champion of human rights, a champion of civic engagement and all of these things, what has become of it? And we have only regressed because of the government we have had in power for the past 26 years. And we see that when we think of all of those scenarios of where we are now, and we juxtapose that against governance and elections and politics, it tells us one thing, that we have lost our direction as a people. And in order for us to regain that, I share the views of Crispin and I share the views of everybody else. We need regime change in Dominica. We need a change once and for all for Dominica to get back on course to what we knew. And not only that, the potential that Dominica can become. We have our young people in Dominica, our entrepreneurs, our farmers, our fishermen, our businessmen, our creative artists, and all these people are losing out on the opportunity to realize their full potential. And it's all because of one thing. The current government we have in power today. I'm not sure if anybody listened to the budget today. Forget the presidential address, because I mean, Mr. Shaw and Mr. Sorrento and Mr. Signoret and these people would be, I mean, would be, how do you call it now? Let's not come in there. But I mean, when I sat down and I listened to the budget debate today, and I said to myself, what is in that for Dominicans? When you look at the allocation of funds and the amount of money that has been distributed to certain ministries versus other ministries, you ask yourself, where is the vision? Where is the vision for the development of it? And that rests Dominicans and Crispin. Thanks for shedding light on the fact today that maybe for the first time in 30 years, not one Dominican student has been able to access university in the United States. Man, that's a frightening thing. That's a frightening thing, because you remember the doors of U.S. universities opened in the 80s. We had floods of them, and regrettably, many of them did not come back home, regrettably. And they could have come back home to make but I mean, it's still opportunities to realize their potential. And for the first time in close to 40 years since independence, that is a major step backwards as we look forward to celebrating our 50th anniversary. And that is a statement that has to resonate across Dominica by every politician, by every person of interest, that the dreams of the young people of Dominica have been snuffed out. And that is a great plague. My God, that is a major aspect of a plague that is going to infest the future of the prospective bright Dominicans who are not able to access, for the first time in 40 years since independence, access to universities in the United States. And that's a frightening thing. It's more than frightening, So again, I mean, that's something people have to think clearly. And, when we think of any elections in Dominica, a serious consideration has to be, we need free and fair elections. We need to have a level playing field. If anything, in good conscience, the Electoral Commission should resign. The Chief Elections Officer should resign. And people, or have a conversion of heart, for God's sake. Come to their senses. Okay? Get up from, the situation like the prodigal son where you're in your pigsty and you say things can be better. And have that metanoia experience so that the people of Dominica can breathe and that I think, we can have that change that we need to move Dominica forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot for those final words there, Simeon. Dr. Andre, could you give us your further thoughts, any further thoughts that you had, and then you have the final word.
Thank you and good night. And let me commend the panelists for the exceptional presentation. Let me say this, it may sound negative, but it's true. There's no biblical road to Damascus in Dominica as we speak. There's only a road to destruction, a road to damnation. Now, Simeon said something, I'm gonna agree with him. He said, I hope that people of goodwill will send a clear message. Simeon, they will, but that's not the problem. The problem are those persons who are going to be imported from every nook and cranny in Dominica, from every corner in the Eastern Caribbean and elsewhere. You made mention about this big guy from Santa Roma who is actively playing his role in stealing elections. Therein lies the problem. Therein lies the plague. Because if that process is replicated throughout Dominica, you could see the infestation. Some of your listeners may be familiar with a book by a French writer called Albert Camus, called The Plague. When the island or the country was just decimated by a hidden and mysterious damage, turned out to be the bubonic plague, the plague of biblical proportions, that virtually destroyed the country. But there was some redemptive components to it, because after a while, people started mysteriously yet again getting better and bore witness to a new community. I hope that that component of that plague, the redemptive portion, will be visited upon Dominica at some time as we speak. Because if it is not, the death the country will suffer may not be a physical death, but it may be a spiritual, an economic, a financial, a psychological death that will take generations to undo. Because what we are seeing as we speak, we are seeing virtually every sector of integrity and accountability and transparency is being eroded, termite-like, by this hidden manifestation of death and destruction. But we have to hope for the better. And I think there's always a few good men. There's a famous movie with that name, who will certainly work towards the redemption of Dominica. Hopefully it will not just be a few good men. It will be an increasing storm of good people saying enough is enough. Let us all play our individual parts. We may make different contributions, but we can all contribute in a fashion that is important to the redemption of the Dominica. And so we end on that good note, I think. Let us look at a brighter future. Let us be aware of those things that are happening that are irregular, that are illegal. And hopefully, let us hope that we can marshal the legal energy and the financial backing to challenge these things, because it seems to me at this juncture, as opposed to a decade ago, the chances of prevailing are much greater than they were. And on that note, I say good evening to your listeners, Mr. G, and to yourself and Lambie and Sherwin and all the panelists for the exceptionally good work that they did tonight. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thank you to all the wonderful folks who are still with us on Facebook and on YouTube and on the internet, on the radio. Thank you so much for sticking with us tonight. We hope to have another topic next Tuesday on a different topic. So I hope you can be with us next Tuesday as well. Let me just say thank you to Crispin and IP and Simeon and you, Dr. Andre and Lambie and Sherwin. I think a job well done tonight. I mean, I think if the people of Goodwill are listening, the people of Dominica are listening closely to things that have been said here tonight, I think there'll be some lessons learned from all of what was being said here tonight. And of course, Simeon said, well, let's look forward to the people of Goodwill sending a message to the nation. Let's hope for the best in that regard. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here tonight and making your wonderful contributions, and a pleasant good night to everybody. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you soon.
On Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View on Q. Networking Dominica with the rest of the world. The experts are in the house. From Dominica, Canada, the Caribbean, the United